Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. In this video, we're taking a look at the Elcan Spectre DR dual field of view optic. If you were to bring up the Spectre DR to a group of people who used it, especially if they used it for any considerable amount of time, it's going to be a very house-divided conversation. Half the people I talked to who used them loved them, half the people I talked to hated them. Well, there was no gray area in the conversation. So I was curious about it because in the military I came in contact with people who had them issued to them, but I wasn't cool enough to have one issued to me, which was fine. And it just seemed to be, even back then, thinking back to myself then, people either loved it or they hated it, and I never could really figure out why, because obviously I didn't have any time with one. So I decided that I wanted to take a look at the Spectre DR. Reason being is it's been around for not a long time, it's been around for some time. It's been on the market for a while, long enough for certainly the bugs to be worked out of it. So I just wondered why it wasn't more popular than it is. Is it a failure of marketing? Is it a bad optic? Like, what was the reason that we didn't see more Elcans out there in the world? Now, some people might think, well, the price. The Elcan Spectre DR is kind of expensive compared to other optics in the same, I guess you would consider, category, which we'll get to. But that's not really an argument, because there's plenty of optics right around the same price range that are popular. So what was it about the Elcan that set it apart from those other optics when it came to popularity? Why is it such a niche optic? Well, Kinsey's Optics had a really good deal on one, so I went ahead and picked one up, and I wanted to put it through my review process to see why, if any reason, the Elcan isn't more popular. Now, one of the things I hear about the Elcan Spectre DR more than anything else is it's built like a tank. People verbatim, that's the comment. Even people who don't like the Elcan Spectre DR use that same comment. Well, it's really, really well built. And then they have particular issues with it besides that. The design of the Elcan is pretty, I wouldn't say 100% unique, but it definitely has very, very few other optics in its specific category. And the fact that instead of being a variable magnification optic, it is a dual field of view optic. What that means is it has a 1 power setting and a 4 power setting, and no settings in between, which is a very pretty much awesome feature if you think about it, because I know me, when I'm using a 1 to 4 or even, like, you know, a 4 to 12, it's very rare that I go from that 1 power or that lowest power setting and stop somewhere in the middle, especially on a 1 to 4. I'm either going to be on 1 or I'm going to be on 4, and there's no middle ground there. So having an optic that removes those settings in the middle is actually really cool. Another cool thing about it is the adjustment feature that you have on the Elcan is literally just a lever. Just right there. Go ahead and turn the rifle around so you can see it, and I'll show it to you again. Is all I have to do is thumb that forward to go from 1 to 4, which is, if you think about it, pretty slick, pretty fast, pretty user intuitive. I don't have to mess with a foxtail or a dial or a ring or anything like that. I can be on the gun and literally flip from 1 to 4 and then back. Support hand off, make the adjustment, support hand back on the rifle, and I'm back to work. So beside the fact that it's a dual field of view optic versus a variable magnification optic, which is kind of a terminology thing, but it's also being specific to the features. There are no variable powers. There's 1 or there's 4. The only other system that you're really going to have access to that has that ability is a flip-to-side magnifier like you'd get for an Aimpoint or an EOTech. And those, you know, love them or hate them, they're not going to give you the same degree of options that you're going to get with the Elcan, which is what we're getting into now. What else does the Elcan offer? Well, it does have integrated built-in backup iron sights, which I'll talk about right now. As you can see, the sight radius is very, very minimal. The reason these are there is in the event that your optic becomes fogged up, like if you're going from inside to outside, humid area, something like that. Emergency situations only would you use these sights, because they're not specific. It's similar to like if you were to take your standard AR platform sights and use the ghost ring or the low light setting. It's going to get the work done at closer to intermediate ranges, but it's not something that you're going to be able to use at great distances. Plus, you have a really significantly reduced sight radius. In fact, the sight radius they give you is less than what you'd find on some compact handguns. But as you can see, even with this reduced sight radius, I'm able to deliver accurate gunfire just using these backup iron sights, which is a really cool feature that's built right into the Elcan. Of course, the bad thing about it is there is a height over bore issue, a significant one if you think about it, but the sights are fixed. So if you're going to use them, if you're going to use an Elcan, spend some time, a couple hundred rounds even, or 10 or 15 rounds every time you go out to the range to practice to kind of ingrain that mechanical offset into you. So in the event that you do need these, you know where your hold has to be at your varied close distance ranges. Moving from there, we get into the reticle. The Elcan Spectre DR comes with multiple reticle options. This particular one has the BDC for the 62 grain round. It is military centric, so it's 62 grain, which is what I shot during the entire review process. About 1,000 rounds of Privy Partisan 62 grain, which isn't technically mil spec, but it is roughly the same round that this BDC is graduated for. I'm not a huge fan of the 62 grain round, I'll be honest with you, and that's a totally different subject, but as far as the BDC goes, for the 62 grain round, it performed extremely well, and it seemed to be exactly what it was supposed to be, which is a BDC reticle for the 62 grain round in 223-556. As far as point aim, point impact goes, once this thing was zeroed, I did zero at the recommended 100 meter range. On 4 power, ranging out, I was only able to shoot out to 300 meters with it, unfortunately, but 300 meters on 10-inch steel, I was getting consistent hits, which is exactly what you want from this rifle system, exactly what you want from the BDC. If it's going to offer you a ballistic drop calculator reticle, then you want it to be accurate for the round that you're going to fire. Now, I did throw some 62 grain Hornady in here just to see if it was green tip centric, like if it was that specific, and I was still able to get consistent hits with that. So I think any 62 grain round, of course, if you're going to pick one up, you want to try this for yourself, it's going to BDC for that round well enough to get the work done. For carbine length guns, Elcan says it's out to 600 meters, and for machine guns, it's supposed to be out to 1,000 meters. I don't have a machine gun, so I wasn't able to check that, and of course, I wasn't able to shoot out to 1,000 anyway. Now here's my second favorite feature, and that is the reticle itself has 5 and 5 illuminated reticle options. What I mean by that is I've got 5 settings for a CQB dot, your traditional red dot, 1.5 to 6 MOA depending on what setting I'm on, and then I have 2 night vision settings. That's pretty damn awesome. Using on the 1 power, just snapping in, everything like that, it works just like a red dot sight. I didn't really get any tunneling effect issues or anything. The glass is clean. I've got a wide field of view. That was cool. Then I've got 5 settings for the entire reticle to be illuminated. 2 night vision settings and then 3 eye visible, any condition settings to illuminate the reticle in red. So 10 total illumination settings that are available to me, 4 for night vision, 6 for the naked eye. I don't know of another optic out there, especially one that's built like this, that's going to offer that many options for you. And being able to go from a CQB dot on 1, flip it to 4, and then go to illuminate the entire reticle in a low light or twilight situation, or even slave it to my night vision, is a feature that I really, really appreciate on this optic. So when I polled the people who'd used the Spectre DR, one of the most common things in the negative column that people brought up is the fact that the adjustments are exposed. As you can see, my elevation and my windage adjustments, they move the entire body. It's not like you'd get with other optics where all elevation and windage adjustments occur inside an enclosed space. It actually moves the optic body itself when you adjust it. There are some built-in shock features that will prevent it from losing zero, at least in theory. But that's definitely one of the things that people looked at and said, you know what, it's built like a tank, yeah, I get it. But the fact that the elevation and windage adjustments are external, the whole body itself moves versus the adjustments that happen internally, is something that gave people great pause. So obviously the elevation and windage adjustments being exposed is something that people didn't care for. It is half MOA adjustments, so you can get pretty precise with this. Obviously not as precise as you'd get from some other optics, but in the 1 to 4, or in this case 1 or 4 category, half MOA is going to get you roughly what you're going to need to get without being too precise. Because again, at 4x max magnification, you're not going to shoot super precision shooting out 600, 700, 800 meters anyway. For that, you'd use something that had a little bit more reach than a 1 or 4 magnification optic. Now, the question is, with the exposed elevation and windage adjustments and just the nature of the optic in general, is it really built like a tank? Well, here's a 5-round group I shot, MagPod supported with 62 grain Privy Partisan ammunition to show you where the rifle is hitting. Now, obviously not the greatest group I've ever shot. Of course, shooting magpot supported, and then the ammunition itself is not the most accurate ammunition in the world versus what I would normally shoot. But it gives us a good sample size, a good idea of where the rifle is zeroed, where it's hitting. Now, of course, I want to be able to test and see if the rifle were to take a significant fall, or if it fell over or anything like that, if it was going to cause a shift in zero. That's something we want to be concerned about, especially since the actual body of the optic itself creates the adjustment versus an internalized adjustment like you get with most other optics. Now, the caveat that I always give when I do optics reviews is if your rifle takes a significant fall, you need to check your zero anyway. Don't trust it if you have the option not to trust it. If it happens in the moment when you're actually using the rifle for self-defense purposes, then you got to go with what you got. And that's where tests like this come into play that give you that confidence in the event that it does happen. I can still trust my optic if I don't have time immediately to check it. So the most common thing, like I said, was Elcan's built like a tank. Elcan's built like a tank. Of course, I got to test that, right? My normal test, I just do a balcony drop. A little bit outside the realm of reality. Again, most people are not going to throw their rifle off a balcony or have it fall that far. But I want to accelerate multiple drops and kind of simulate it taking a catastrophic hit. So I went ahead and did my balcony test. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. So 3 balcony drops in a row. Is the rifle going to maintain at zero? Well, here is the 5-round group I fired after the 3rd drop. I'm calling that good. Based on the conditions and the ammunition I had available to me, could there have potentially been a slight shift? Yes. But when I visually inspected the optic, I didn't see it out of place. And remember what I talked about, how I could visually see if my rifle had fallen out of zero, and that's something that you can do. Just like you would do with the external adjustments on a scope or the external adjustments on an RMR, you can paint mark your 0 point. And if the rifle does take a significant fall, you can just look at it and be like, okay, it has shifted, I need to check my 0. That's something you're not going to get from a lot of other optics. Again, it might not be something you need. You may not be using this optic in an environment where you're really worried about that. And again, if it does take a fall, you should check it anyway. But I'm satisfied with the fact how many drops this thing took that I would still be able to shoot accurately at realistic ranges that I would use the Elcan for. My final verdict on the Elcan Spectre DR. During the review process, I put right around 1,000 rounds through it. I used it for a couple of classes I was teaching. I ran a night vision class, and I also just taught general defensive rifle fundamentals, defensive rifle 1 with it, and then I spent a lot of time on the range just practicing with it. And I have actually now firmly set myself in the camp of I love the Elcan Spectre DR. My only complaint is eye relief on 4 seconds. So if I'm in 1, no big deal. But when I go to 4, if my head isn't in the exact specific right place, the eye relief on this thing is very unforgiving. I'm gonna have to make an adjustment. So if you're going to use the Spectre, like I found, you basically have to memorize your cheek weld positioning a little bit more specific than you would with some other optics. So on 4 power, my head has to be within ½ an inch in the right place. Not a huge deal if this is going to be your go-to optic. You're going to get used to it very quick. There is a learning curve, but once you get past that that conscious having to readjust, you're going to be just fine. But if I had to give this thing a big negative, the negative would be on the eye relief. On 4 power, it is very, very unforgiving. Can you still get good shots done even if you do get some scope shadow? Yeah, different topic, of course. But that, if I had to complain about anything, that's definitely going to be my complaint. But it's something, like I said, that you can work through very easily, especially if this is going to be the optic that you use. One potential negative, and again, another potential negative could be the cost, but what you're getting, I think you're getting exactly what you're paying for. I mean, the reticle options, a backup iron sights, the fact that it is in fact built like a tank, the ease of adjustment, ease of zeroing, BDC reticle, and then those 10 different reticle options from CQB on one side and then the total illuminated reticle on the other side. You're getting a lot of features in the thing. And then of course, a big selling point is the fact that it's 1 or 4. Which is awesome. Can you get that from other systems? Yeah, you can use a flip-to-side magnifier, like I said, or some other optics out there, but all things considered, if this is the type of package you're looking for, you really don't have to look any further than the Elcan Spectre DR. Again, it's always going to be a house divided with this thing. People are going to love it or they're going to hate it. I love it. I would recommend it to anyone who asked me, hey, what do you think of the Elcan Spectre DR? If you're looking for a variable magnification optic that's going to be almost bomb-proof and give you a lot of reticle options, you don't need to look any further than this. I'm Elcan with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.